In the darkest of times, the world needs a hero, and that hero is Sonic the Hedgehog, who saves the world countless of times from Dr. Eggman, giant killer robots, evil demigods, monsters of the week, and etc. And yet, here we are, in a desolate post-apocalyptic city ravaged by giant Death Egg-like robots. Ambiguously titled Project Sonic 2017 by Sega, this game appears to be taking a more serious tone as Sonic stares angrily at the scene, with clenched fists and gritted teeth, ready to save the day. Except, haven't we already seen all this before? Watching this trailer brings up memories of Crisis City in Sonic 06, as well as Chaotic Inferno in Sonic Rivals 2. Each of those games dealt with preventing a hellish future filled with flames and destruction. Both games also involve time traveling and different dimensions. Also, seeing classic Sonic make an appearance in this trailer makes one assume that this game will also deal with that as well. Now, we've heard several theories and speculations from many different Sonic fans on what exactly is going on here. Some said that classic Dr. Eggman learned from his mistakes from modern Dr. Eggman and successfully took over the world, forcing classic and modern Sonic to reunite and stop him. Others have said that this is a continuation of Sonic Chronicles, while some have said that this is set in the Archie universe and the phrase "join the resistance" is actually Sonic joining the Freedom Fighters. But what if this isn't a continuation of Chronicles, Generations, or Archie? What if this is something much more serious, dark, and unsettling? What if Sonic and his friends are stuck in a never-ending time loop paradox, and the resistance symbolizes them resisting against the forces of nature in the hopes of breaking out of this vicious cycle? I'm GamerGuide7Aces.
And I'm Husky Z, and we're about to dive into one of the most complex theories in our show yet. We've done careful and thorough research for the past month since the trailer was released, and after hearing quite a lot of theories regarding this game, none of them are quite like ours. So pull out your thinking caps, and let's begin.
Welcome back, fellow theorists. Now, you may be asking, how did this happen? Why is everything in Sonic's world up in flames again? Well, I have a very intricate idea as to what may be going on, but in order to decipher this convoluted theory, we must first understand the basics here. The concept of time traveling was lightly touched on in my previous theory debate with my colleague, the Sega Scourge. Both of us came up with radically different theories of how we view time travel in the Sonic universe. Sega Scourge's argument was the concept of multiple universes, which means that you can actually enter a different parallel universe after having made the journey back in time, so you don't affect the history of the universe from which you came. In effect, anything that can happen will happen, but the way it happens is by entering a parallel universe. Pretty bizarre, huh? So, for example, in Sonic 06, when Silver the Hedgehog went to the past to try to change his future still remained the same when he returned. This is similar to Trunks' story in Dragon Ball Z, when he returned to the future after the defeat of Perfect Cell. He still needed to defeat the evil androids 17 and 18. Now, my argument in that epic theory debate was the grandfather paradox theory, which means that a person who travels to the past and kills their own grandfather prevents the existence of their father or mother, and therefore their own existence. And I use Back to the Future as an example to prove my point that Sonic can't be Silver's ancestor, because if Mephiles killed Sonic, that would have wiped out Silver's entire lineage. If you haven't seen that debate video yet, I strongly advise you to watch it before you see this, so you don't get too confused. Now, when comparing Scourge's and my theory to Project 2017, we're both kind of right. While I don't think there's going to be any grandfather paradox scenarios going on in this game, there does seem to be some type of paradox, where the outcome of events keep on changing, but in multiple universes, or different ways so to speak. But the events keep happening in the same way, therefore it seems to be some sort of time loop. As I like to call it, a time loop paradox. Let me try and break this down. Time is a one-way street of irreversible events, and trying to restore order creates more disorder across the universe. For example, if you had a nice plate that was put together very orderly, and you dropped it, it will become disorderly, which is natural. But if you try to restore order by attempting to glue the plate back together, your actions will release enough energy into the surrounding environment to create more disorder in the universe as a whole.
When Sonic, Silver, and Shadow kept meddling with time, trying to stop Mephiles from merging with Iblis, didn't their actions ultimately cause it to still happen? Like a self-fulfilling prophecy, Mephiles and Iblis inevitably merged and became Solaris. Even after the entity's defeat, Sonic and Elise still had to go back in time once again to make sure that Solaris was gone for good. And as much as we'd like to believe that the game has truly been retconned, nothing just vanishes from existence. It has to go somewhere. Who knows? What if Mephiles ended up being the Time Eater in Sonic Generations? It seems like whenever Sonic and his friends try to change the past, they ended up creating an even worse future for themselves. In the process, that seems to repeat itself, but in a different time form, a time loop paradox. A great example of this is Life is Strange, an episodic story-driven video game developed by Square Enix. Throughout the game, the main character Max constantly meddles with time, going back to fix scenarios, and frequently saves her friend Chloe from fatal encounters. But the more she continues to save Chloe from death, the more perilous situations Chloe faces. Chloe's fate is death, yet her best friend Max keeps trying to cheat death, when in fact, she's only delaying the inevitable. At the end of the game, Max's actions cause serious consequences as a superstorm tornado attacks her city. The only way to stop this disaster from happening is for Max to go back in time once more and allow Chloe to be killed by Nathan. Max must make a choice: sacrifice Chloe's life in order to save Arcadia Bay, or sacrifice Arcadia Bay in order to spare Chloe. The correct ending is to let Chloe die, the same way she died at the beginning of the game, which happens to be a time loop. You tried to change everything, but ended up changing nothing. Time is an unstoppable force that we really have no control over. However, the arrow of time can be bent to extreme conditions.
To explain this whole concept of time loops, it all goes back to Albert Einstein's theory of relativity. This is a very difficult theory to understand for a lot of people, so I'll put it in simple terms. Einstein showed that the gravity of massive objects like planets, stars, and black holes can actually cause space itself to bend. He also explained that space and time can be linked into a single something called spacetime. This means that whenever something in space is warped, so is time. So you can imagine the gravitational field is so strong that space and time curl back on themselves, and you can start at one point going forward in time and come back at the point that you left. When the arrow of time bends around to meet its tail, it creates an endless loop in which the same events happen over and over again. Now we all know the Chaos Emeralds have extraordinary powers and time-bending elements, so if this is Sonic's timeline curling back on itself, and the universe just repeats itself over again, every moment in time will just repeat an infinite number of times. Whether it happens in different circumstances, it would still have the same outcome. A great cinematic example of a time loop is in the movie Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Near the climax, Harry, Ron, and Hermione go see Buckbeak, Hagrid's pet hippogriff, just before his execution. Several weird things happen between that point to the part where Harry and Sirius Black are attacked by the Dementors. But once they go back in time to save Sirius from being killed, it all starts to make sense. The person who threw the rocks in Hagrid's hut was the future Hermione trying to get their past selves' attention to leave the hut before the executioner came. Also, the executioner never really killed Buckbeak because he was already rescued by future Harry and future Hermione. And last but not least, it was future Harry who defeated all the Dementors and saved his past self and Sirius Black. And just when they arrived back at the hospital wing, their past selves disappeared to go back in time, starting the process all over again. But as for Sonic and his friends, their time loop paradox doesn't bring a happy ending, but just an endless cycle of pain and tragedy. Now, at the end of the day, this is just a theory of a game we barely know much about. It could be right, or it could be far from the truth. But Husky Z and I intend to learn more about Sonic's fate in this next installment. We all do. And I can tell you this, whatever's in store for Sonic, he's going to need all the help he can get.